So then they go back and forth calling each other the N-word. And, you know, saying you don't know the F this and you don't know the F that. And it's just escalating. It's escalating. And the main gist of it was Pac was saying, you're not even somebody that I can rely on anymore. You don't know what it is really to be like on the streets anymore. You've gotten too fancy. You're just hoity-toity. You're just this, you're just that. You just don't know how to be real anymore. Just nothing but square. I always knew it. I always saw it. Now I know it for real and all this. And then she's just mad because she's like, hey, I'm just trying to keep you safe. And it seems like you're just letting your anger and your bitterness and your disappointment and all of this run the show. And it's blinding you to the fact that your partners, these real partners that you say you have, do not have your back. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise. We are reading Worthy today. We're going to go through 2 chapters today. We're hitting the ground running, friends, because I got something to say. I'm sick of this book. I mean, it's fine, whatever. And I'm going to finish what I start. But I mean, I'm ready for Brittany, okay? Brittany's memoir is sitting at the top of my closet, just waiting for me to crack that open. I've read ahead. It's great. And in December, I want to start that book. Well, we still have part 3 of the 3 parts left. But we're going to read 2 chapters today. And from here on out, we're just going to do a couple of chapters every episode. We're going to get this done. But today's episode is actually really going to be interesting. There's 2 chapters. The first one is called, let me see. The first one's called Loss Unmourned. The second one is The Reluctant Bride. I thought The Reluctant Bride would be better than it was. Not really. I mean, the title is way more titillating than the actual text. Loss Unmourned is pretty good. So we're going to do that one. Probably going to get more into the details on that one. And then The Reluctant Bride, not interesting. And, you know, quite frankly, I've heard her talk before. Like, I remember when she, like, comes out and lets everybody know she didn't even really want to marry Will in the first place. And the way she talks about it in person is very different than the way she writes about it. The way she writes about it is a lot more understandable. And it doesn't, like, when she talked about it, she made it sound like this, like, dramatic revelation. But then when she writes about it and tells you everything that was going on and you know, the unexpected pregnancy, you can completely see why I'd be like, okay, you know, is this really where we're going with this? It's not that she didn't want to marry Will. It's that she didn't like the way everybody was forcing her to have like a big wedding and all this. That's what she didn't want. But like moving forward with him in a relationship was not an issue. So I feel like when she decided to come out and act like, you guys, I have something to tell you. I didn't even want to marry Will. That wasn't even a true reflection of what had happened. That was her drumming up a bunch of drama for no reason. So The Reluctant Bride, a blah chapter. We'll rush through that. But Loss Unmourned is good. Loss Unmourned is really good. We've got a lot of drama here and a person who does not know how to manage loss in any capacity. She does not know how to manage her emotions. And so she just does a lot of deny. It didn't really happen. I'm just going to going to go through life and pretend, you know, we're all good. All right, as always, if you will hit the like button, subscribe, send to a friend, all the things, comment. It's so sweet. I get people all the time who are like, I'm sorry I'm commenting so much. And I'm like, no, I got no problems with that. You comment as much as you want. Chapter 12, like I said, it's called The Loss Unmourned. So she starts it out by bringing up her friend Eazy-E. Now, you'll recall him from a previous chapter. Eazy-E was in the music industry. I think he had been with the group NWA. It had dissolved, thanks in part to Suge Knight, who wanted to get all up in people's business. Look, you guys, I don't know about a lot of this stuff, but I can tell you that she had known for a while that her friend Eazy-E was not well. And she had known him as this sort of quirky, interesting guy who would come into her life from time to time. I would never say that they seemed like they were like super good friends. They were friends. He would like pop into her life and do funny little things. Like he'd come by her house and she wouldn't be there. So he'd write her a note backwards that she'd have to read in the mirror. And he'd like, when he'd page her, he would page her so that the numbers look like words. I mean, like she says he was all quirky and interesting and all this. He was also the guy that had told her that he thought she should record some of her poetry that her ex-boyfriend had illustrated and like make an audio recording to go along with the book of poetry. He was all about owning your artistic property. That's what we've heard about him thus far, but we've also heard that she knew that something was wrong with him. He seemed like he was always sick. He always had a cold. And so she was always like, why don't you go to the doctor? And, you know, he'd brush it off. He didn't want to talk about it. Anyway, he's up in the hospital with pneumonia, but he calls her because he had heard that she was going to be making this video. She was supposed to be directing this video for Dre. And this is the thing. she says Dr. Dre wanted her to direct this video. In previous chapters, and I don't think I even mentioned it because I was like, I hardly believed it. She claims that she was like, had asked to direct this one guy's video. He let her, and then like she became like this big hit sensation in the hip hop world where she was like a wanted talent for directing. Questionable, because I'm not sure which videos those were. She says a lot of things, and I'm like, well, we can look this up and see if that's true or not. Like, do you remember when she said that she and Tupac worked on that video together? He wanted her in the video, Brenda's Got a Baby. She's not in Brenda's Got a Baby. I went and watched that video. Jada's nowhere to be seen, so I don't know. But anyway, she claims that she was a big talent in the hip-hop world for directing videos. And Dr. Dre, of all people, wanted her to direct this video of his for California Love. She had this big concept, a hood version of Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. So she wants to do this hood version, and Dr. Dre's all excited about it, and she can't wait to sink her teeth into that whole thing. But then Eazy-E calls from his hospital bed and says, I don't think that's a good idea. It's not a good idea for you to be on set. You don't want to be around Suge. Jada writes, damn it. I was so caught up in the art and excitement that I had totally forgot about Suge Knight and his ties to Dre at the time, besides the ongoing issues with the dissolution of NWA. Suge had a reputation for violence, and after meeting him a few times, I could see his level of intimidation with my own eyes. The thought of Suge on the set gave me pause. Damn, E, I didn't even think about that part. So she says that Eazy-E, feeling distraught that he was taking work out of her hands, tried to offer her maybe another video that she could make for him. And she played along and told him, yeah, send me the music, I'll see what I can come up with. But it was all just sort of like so many words because she didn't really want to do any videos for him. It was Dr. Dre she wanted to work with. Well, she is nervous to work with Suge Knight. She'll go on to say a couple of times when she had met him, and it was pretty whack. And so she decided it wasn't for her. She's going to steer clear of this guy. When she called Dr. Dre and said, hey, I can't be the director on that video, and bowed out in some sort of diplomatic way, she was told that the video was on hold anyway. But as it turns out, she writes, California Love went through unexpected changes in months to come, namely that a different version was recorded with Tupac included on the track, which made an already banging song unstoppable. Here's a funny thing. Eazy was ahead of the curve, because once Pac got into the record, he would not have wanted me to direct the video and be on set either. What's up with Pac just bossing her all the time? I do not like this Tupac, and we'll go on to decide. And you guys, you can come for me in the comments if you want to. I do not like Tupac, and y'all aren't going to make me like Tupac. And you can tell me all the things about how I don't understand. I understand. And, oh, you're just drinking Jada's Kool-Aid, Stop hating on Tupac. It's really crazy how you'd hate some guy who's dead. Well, you know what? There's a lot of people out there who've dead, and I can tell you right now, I probably wouldn't like them when they were alive. Tupac goes in that category. Anyway, she's just always letting Tupac boss her all the day. If that's your job and you get to direct, then you direct, girl. Anyway, so she doesn't end up doing California Love. None of us are surprised because who among us actually thought she was going to direct one of Dr. Dre's videos? But all right. Anyway, shortly after the conversation she has with Eazy-E, he dies. That was the last conversation she had with him. Apparently, she goes on to say that he was admitted to the ICU shortly after he had called her, and he was in critical condition. And, as was all revealed, he had full-blown AIDS. Eazy-E was 31 years old when the news broke. Just before his death, he chose to go public to raise awareness about AIDS, especially with young people or anyone who believed that HIV affected only gay men and addicts. He was neither. To which I say, really though? How do you know? Nobody's going to get AIDS walking down the street. So what lifestyle choice had he chosen that would have given him AIDS? I'm not saying he was gay. I'm not saying he was an addict, but he was doing something. You don't just get AIDS from eating a banana or an apple or, digging into a box of Cheez-Its. You're doing something. Anyway, she goes on to say that though she was sad he had died, she just didn't set aside time to mourn for him. This is her MO, by the way. And at first you want to be like, well, she didn't really know Eazy-E that much. He was a guy who'd stop by her house from time to time. He was on the periphery of her life. He knew her well enough to call her when he was worried that she was going to get in, business with Suge Knight. All right. But it wasn't like they were hanging out all the time. They had, on Wednesday nights we go get Mexican. I mean, it was nothing like that. So you can almost be like, well, you can't mourn everybody. I mean, you can be sad, but I mean, nobody's going to be mad at her for not sitting up for 7 days weeping because he's dead. I don't think she knew him that well, but she does. She's like, I didn't mourn him. I didn't know how to process his death, and I didn't know how to do. I don't know how to do grief. I did the only thing I knew how to do, and that was to set the loss aside, not mourn, just keep on moving. And that's what she does with even more significant losses. That's what she's going to do. Now, let's go back to her and Tupac, shall we? She says that, remember the first time she went to Rikers to see Tupac, and it was like a shocker because he was looking pitiful. And he was down in the dumps, and he sounded pitiful, and the whole thing had just snatched the man right out of him. Well, he's regained his confidence. He's in a new prison now. That was the prison for the terrorists, but apparently he has become all that he could be and more. She says that he comes out into the visitors' facilities, and in her words, this man is more swole than I ever seen him. How can you take a book seriously that writes like this? She says that he looked like he'd been spending every waking hour lifting weights, and his rebellious, fearless swag had returned. In addition to his physical regimen, he was working on himself mentally, and he spent all of his other times being awake, reading and writing up a storm. She says that in contrast also to her time when she had seen him at Rikers, this time he's smiling, he's in control of himself, he has vision for the future. She says that he was, according to her, damn near running the place, advocating for reforms within the prison. Most of the inmates had love and admiration for him, but that created haters as well, and sometimes beef with the correctional officers. All of this made for a dangerous concoction, because Pac had no problem getting into confrontations, including with the guards. So she walks up in there, and Tupac immediately assaults her. He grabs her and full on swallows her face in a kiss, all up in her face. So she's like, boy, these are her words, boy. And he starts laughing, and he's like, come on, stop being square. And he says he's been up in this place with all these ugly blankety blanks all day, and what do you want from me? I finally see a woman, I'm going to take my piece if I feel like it. She's like, Pac, please. And he's like, well, shit, you ain't gonna marry me? A kiss is the least you can do. And they both laugh. They're all good. So along with her are a couple of other women. She's there with a female rapper, Nefertiti, and of course her friend Light. So they're just hanging around with Pac, listening to all his stories. He's enjoying holding court there. But as they're talking, he lets her know who should he be in league with all of a sudden but Suge Knight. What? Not him. Pac signing with Death Row, Suge Knight's label, was not good. And she really wanted to jump in and start debating him about that personal choice. But she felt like he wouldn't appreciate her questioning him in front of these two other women. So she's like, note to self, return visit alone. I want to have a little talk with him about this choice. And so when she's driving back, she's thinking about Suge and all the times that she's met him. And driving back home from the prison, she's thinking, okay, the last time I saw Suge Knight, that guy gave me real bad vibes. And I'm afraid that if Tupac gets involved with him, he's a shady dealer. He's going to promise you the world and steal everything while you're looking the other way. So she tells us about some times when she had met him. She says the first time she'd ever met him, a girlfriend of hers had been invited to go have dinner with Suge Knight, and the girlfriend didn't want to go alone because she'd heard about this guy's reputation. Jada says that, of course, the guy was pouring on the charm to her friend, and he just seemed like a big teddy bear. And if that had been the only time she would have met him, she'd have been fooled, thinking, he's a nice guy. What's the difference? But then the second time she saw him, he was at this place called Monty's, and he was supposed to be meeting this R&B group because he wanted to manage them. But his intimidation tactics were pretty extreme. He had a whole group, 3 or 4 guys, placed strategically around the surrounding space. Not so that it was super obvious, but if you cared to look up, you'd notice that there's a whole bunch of guys around here ready to pounce if anything doesn't go exactly the way Suge wants it to go. She said she watched Suge sit there calmly, a cigar stuck between his lips like he was Don Corleone, with a ring of threat around 4 young men who were no threat at all. That day, I got to see that Suge didn't play fair. But see, this is the problem. Tupac is so desperate to get out of prison that he will make deals with anybody who can raise enough money to get him out, unless it's a woman, of course. He's already said that, he's not looking to get bailed out by a group of women, God forbid it. But this Suge Knight over here with all of his promises, he'll make deals there. So she returned back to the prison to talk to Tupac. And she says, we talked calmly like adults. He was in jail and he wanted out, period. And as Pac had been waiting for, a seeming comrade had come along to save him. But I couldn't ignore the alarm ringing in my head. Pac was about to release Me Against the World, which would include Dear Mama, the song he'd written about his mom, and debut at #1 on the album charts, a feat never accomplished by an artist while in prison. By agreeing to sign with Death Row, Pac would gain his freedom after Suge arranged the now $1.4 million required for him to be released without pending the appeal of his conviction. In return, Pac explained, I will owe 3 albums, but I'm going to make my first one a double album, which will count as 2, and then I'll make a third, and then I'm done. So then I can wash my hands of having to be with Suge Knight. Let me tell you something. You make a deal with the devil, you're always his. Okay, you could tell yourself, well, I'm just going to do this, this, and this, and then I'll be out, and Satan's going to let me go. Satan ain't going to let you go, friend. Which is the exact thing that Jada says. She's like, you're dancing with the devil, Pac. I would not enter into this. But Pac held his ground. Suge's the only blankety blank willing to get me out. The way he saw it, everybody else was fine to let him rot in prison. Yeah, everybody else but the women who had raised the money for you, but you wouldn't take it. This guy just drives me crazy. You guys know that I have never, in any of my book reviews, been all like, rah, 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 for the feminist cause. Don't hear me being like, oh, so it's fine, but if a woman is involved, I'm not getting an attitude about it. I'm just saying it bothers me that help was offered to him, but because it didn't come to him in the form he wanted it, he's like, kicks it away and is like, everyone wants me to rot. No, everybody doesn't want you to rot. That's why all your female friends were like, hey, we've raised money. We want to get you out. If it's not a man, I don't want it. Well, then sit there and rot for all we care. Okay. We pivot at this point to talking about her roommate, Maxine. Now, you remember Maxine. Maxine's the one who was doing her hair on the set of Jason's Lyric. Remember when she came in and they said she was too rough around the edges and she had hair on her face and her hair on her head was crazy. And so it was Maxine who nicely was like, hey, I think I can cut it. I can make it look really cute. She loved Maxine's vibe. Maxine's from Canada and wanted to move to LA. And because she'd worked so closely with Jada on the set of Jason's Lyric, they had become friends. And now Maxine is her roommate. But something's not right with Maxine of late. Suddenly, Maxine wants to be called Coco. This is like a new personality. Call me Coco, Jada. Call me Coco. Just come on, just call me Coco. I'm not Maxine anymore. And Jada said she just didn't have any time for that. Your name's not Maxine. I'm not going to call you Coco. Coco, I'm not calling you that. Your mother named you Maxine, so that's what I'm calling you. Sometimes it was entertaining to get Max flustered, the way older siblings do with younger ones, except Max was older than I was. But in that moment, it wasn't so fun. Something was off. Will, who's always hanging around the periphery of all her stories, is all like, okay, Coco, it is. And he was fine calling her whatever she wanted to be called. Maxine and Will were tight. But see, Will has been on a campaign to win everybody over in Jada's life. He sees it as a personal accomplishment if he can get people in her life on his side. So if Maxine wanted to be called Coco, Will had no problem acquiescing to her demands because it's all part of his attempt to be loved by everybody in her life. So he's like, fine, I'll call you Coco. But Jada wasn't going to do that. But if it had all just been her wanting to be called a different name, fine, whatever. But it wasn't just that. One day, Jada's at work and a neighbor calls and says that Maxine's outside in nothing but a bathrobe and she's pacing around outside. There's nothing underneath the bathrobe, very evidently. She's pacing around, banging on the door, causing a bit of a scene. So Jada leaves work because it's only 10 minutes away. Her work is only 10 minutes away from the house. So she rushes home. Maxine, Jada writes, was naked except for a robe. Max, did you lose your key? What happened? She seemed disoriented and out of it. I got locked out. I don't know. A few minutes later, I saw her wearing a short miniskirt. And if she moved in a certain way, it was clear she had no underwear on. Maxine? Coco! Please call me Coco. Coco, you can't go out like that. You need to put on some boy shorts or something with that skirt. I can see your whole name and address. I'm fine. Don't make a big deal about everything, Jada. But this wasn't the only time that happened. I'd cajole her into putting on shorts or changing her clothes, but she was increasingly manic. I thought maybe she was stressed out about her relationship or going through a rough patch. I couldn't figure it out. She then booked a job on location with a team connected to Judy Murdoch, the makeup artist on Jason's Lyric, who was becoming my go-to for movies before she later worked with Will. An incident, which we're not told about, happened on the set of the movie, and Judy was able to intervene. We wanted to get Maxine home to her mother, who could keep an eye on her. As soon as she got back to Toronto, Max received medical care in a hospital, and when the doctors thought she was well enough, she went to stay at her mother's house. They were told that something was wrong with Maxine's thyroid. She had some sort of thyroid condition, her hormones were all off, and that's why she was acting so bizarre. But while she was in Toronto, she constantly called Jada and said, I want to come back to LA. I want to come back to LA. I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. I want to go back. I want to be with you. I'm dying over here. I want to go home to LA with you. And Jada kept being like, no, you need to stay with your mama. You're not okay yet. You'll come back when you're better, but you're not better yet. She really felt guilty about it. But then on the other hand, she was like, I'm not going to give in to what she wants. It's very clear she needs to continue to stay under the care of somebody who has time to watch her. A few days after a brief conversation with Maxine, I got a call from Judy. Remember, that's who Maxine was working with. Strangely, Will happened to be there with me at the time, which was rare for the middle of the day, because he was usually on set at that time for the latest season of Fresh Prince. Judy was upset but calm. She relayed that Maxine had jumped off her mother's balcony to her death, leaving behind only her shoes on the balcony floor. My heart shattered. I couldn't form words. I couldn't breathe. It was too unbearable to allow myself to feel. So she hangs up and she looks at Will and she's like, Maxine committed suicide. And he froze. And then she does something that just smacks of unhealth, like her mentally and emotionally unhealthy move here. She says that Will's on the bed. She jumps on him, rolling on top of him, and they start making love. She said it was primal, me hoping to shut out the pain. I knew better, but at least the reality of her death would be gone for those moments. I needed to feel anything other than the agony of this incomprehensible tragedy. What I'm saying to you is this. If you begin to use sex as a therapy, then you begin to use your partner as a pill, as something that can just be used so that you can feel better. It's abuse of the other person. And what I'm saying is that she consistently does this, where sex becomes the medication that she needs. Sex becomes what she does to regulate herself emotionally, or to forget about the pain, or to stop feeling anxious. And what I'm saying is that is not the way you should be coming together with somebody else. I mean, if there's grief or something and you're both comforting each other, that's one thing. But if you're just using the other person, as she consistently does, that is a form of sexual abuse of the other person. Because you don't enter into a sexual union with somebody so that they can just get you off. That's just what I'm saying. And she's going to consistently learn to use sex as a way to make her inner self able to go on. She says in the long run, the unbearable loss would catch up to me, surfacing over and over again, throwing me into sorrow that I never knew how to express. And see, this is the thing. I think this is some pretty therapized language, but I'll say it anyway. You can continue to go on and say, ignore, and you can feel like you're winning and controlling the situation because you're not in a pool of tears. You're just getting on with life, and you can tell yourself, I'm okay. It's nothing. I'll just go on. I'll just put it in my head, lock it away, put it in a box. It's done. But as they say, you can pretend to forget about it, but the body keeps the score. So she can keep thinking that she's overcome the grief and that she can just move on and just like full steam ahead, but that's not the way it works. And she's going to come upon a time when everything's going to start crashing down around her, and it's because she's not dealing with things. She said she didn't know how to grieve or how to memorialize her friend. So she just simply kept moving and stuffed down the pain and stuffed down the guilt and was just like, I hate that for Maxine, but there's nothing I can do about it. So I got to keep moving on. As a person who tends to deal with grief in a similar way, I understand why she does that, but I can tell you that it is not healthy because it will come up whether you think it will or not, and it's going to come up physically in your body. Anyway, to continue on with the loss theme of the chapter, we go back to her and Tupac. Pac's out of jail. Prison's over. He shows up at this restaurant. She said she can remember it as like it's this haunting memory. He shows up, in her words, looking fly in a suit, stylish but casual. It's a deep navy electric blue with a light sheen to it. I'm in a white dress of some kind. Since Pac's release, he stepped up his style game and I love it. But he wants to talk to her about this movie he wants to do with her. Well, we saw how that worked out last time. If he can manage to actually be in the movie with her. Anyway, he tells her it's this dark comedic movie where, you know, there's this role and she'd be perfect for it, blah, blah, blah. But she can hardly listen to what he's saying because there's like this giant elephant in the room. She says, Pac knows and I'm not at all happy about his get down since his release. His whole vibe has changed since his association with Suge. And I can't make it all Suge's fault. Post-jail, Pac's a little different. I mean, who wouldn't be after doing time? But I believe that he's allowing his bitterness, disappointment, and anger to be preyed on by Suge. And I believe that she's right. And she tries to tell him, look, I'm worried about you. I just feel like something's off, and I feel like this person's getting in your head, and I feel like this person's using your pain against you, and I'm just a little bit worried about all of the stuff that's going on with you and Suge. You know, hold your ground against this guy. Don't give him everything you got. But then Tupac just blows it out of complete proportion, and he starts going after her personally. All she said was just watch where you're going, that this guy's dangerous. Everybody said Suge Knight was dangerous. She's not saying anything that's like wild and like, how dare you call my friend dangerous? No one ever said he was dangerous a day in his life. She's not saying anything that anybody else wouldn't say to him, but he can't hear it from Jada. And he flies into a rage and he leans across the table and he starts just kind of hissing in her face because they don't want to be overheard. He doesn't need her advice to tell him anything. And that since she got to Hollywood, she's gotten all Hollywood about everything. And she doesn't understand what it takes to be a real black man on the streets. You know, he uses some different language. And she's like, well, where is all this going? My genuine concern is his display of vengeance since he was shot and released from prison. And his participation in the steady brewing of the East Coast-West Coast beef. It's about to put Pac back in jail or worse. But he cuts her off. I know what you think about me. He pauses for a beat. I can see your thoughts and your dreams. And I know what you're thinking. You can't effing hide from me. You done gone all Hollywood. That's cool. That's why I got my real partners out here. I just can't with this guy. I just can't with him. The way he talks to her is so demeaning. He's constantly putting her down. He's constantly acting like her point of view doesn't matter. He's constantly just like, I know she says they're like big, deep friends. I would have liked to see more conversations that showed that they were friends. And maybe this is why, I mean, she's constantly showing us this ugly side of him. And she always says, we could get past anything. Me and Pac could get past anything. And she says that over and over. But my thing is, okay, but when were y'all ever right together? Because you guys are always fighting. And he's always being vindictive, you know? And you're always being like, but I let it go. Because, you know, we loved each other so much. Do you guys love each other? Because y'all are mean to each other. Anyway, so he's over there hissing in her face, and then she gets upset. You know, don't get in Jada's face, because then she's going to come roaring back. So she leans across the table and does her own hissing. And she says, who the F do you think you're talking to, Pac? Talking about how I'm all Hollywood. You're being reckless. So then they go back and forth calling each other the N-word. And, you know, saying, you don't know the F this, and you don't know the F that. And, I mean, I would go into it, but, you know, not looking to get this video taken down. So after it's just escalating. It's escalating. And the main gist of it was, Pac was saying, you're not even somebody that I can rely on anymore. You don't know what it is really to be like on the streets anymore. You gotten too fancy. You're just hoity-toity. You're just this, you're just that. You just don't know how to be real anymore. Just nothing but square. I always knew it. I always saw it. Now I know it for real and all this. And then she's just mad because she's like, hey, I'm just trying to keep you safe. And it seems like you're just letting your anger and your bitterness and your disappointment and all of this run the show. And it's blinding you to the fact that your partners, these real partners that you say you have, do not have your back. All right, well, they just finally, it's just combusts. And they just like, you know, both of them roar up from the table and just bust out the front door of the restaurant. Neither one wants to see the other one ever again. And she calls her manager and just rips into him and is like, F Tupac, I don't want to be in that stupid movie or anything with him. I never want to talk to him again. If you see him coming and my name's associated with him, make sure it never happens and blah, 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 blah. So she contends with this whole thing by telling herself that, look, we did have a big fight. It was a pretty bad one. We'll circle back around, though, because this was not new. She and he had major blow-ups multiple times in the relationship, all the time. Like, every year, there were, like, many fights. So this isn't like, they're not breaking new ground here. But what was new is she refused in her heart to call him back. Like, he was out of line. He was mean to me. I was only trying to take care of him. He belittled me. He talked down to me. He went for the jugular when all I was trying to do is say, hey, I'm worried about you. And then he started to attack me personally. So she said, I'm not calling him back. If he ever wants to talk to me again, he better pick up that phone, because I will never be the first one to reach out in this situation. Well, that's the last time she saw him. Almost a year passed. On September 8th, 1996, Pac was shot in Las Vegas, and I was in Toronto shooting the movie Woo. I was on set when I got a page from Afeni. So Afeni, who always seems to be in her own emotional comatose, calls and says, Pac's been shot. He's in a coma, but don't worry about it. He's going to be fine. And I don't know if any doctor had told her that he was going to be fine, or she just assumed that her son was invincible, because up until this point, he has been. He was shot 5 times last time. He managed to rally himself. And it seems like he can't be taken down. Whatever threat has been on his life, even since he was a young guy in the hood in Baltimore, he seems to be able to bob and weave and get out of whatever. So she keeps telling Jada everything's fine, he's going to live, he's going to live. Well, it ain't fine, it ain't fine, it ain't fine, and he ain't going to live. 5 days go by, and she had said she would come straight there, but Afeni keeps telling her, you don't need to come yet. He's not going to die. There was this big birthday celebration that Will had planned for her in New York City. It was a little ahead of her birthday, but Will wasn't going to be able to be there on her actual birthday, so she was supposed to fly to New York City and stay for several days, and there was a big hoopla going on. Afeni's like, go celebrate. It's fine. Pac's okay. He'll be here when you're done in New York. That's what she believed. Well, the night of her birthday celebration, they come back to the hotel. Cherie calls Will. You know, Cherie and Will still have pretty decent communication going on between them, because they do have a child. So it's not like totally out of the realm that he would be talking to her. But Cherie calls and says, Pac just died. Tupac just died. And Jada hears Cherie say that, and it just really, really tips her over. It's like, how dare Cherie be spreading around this vicious gossip that Tupac's dead? I happen to be talking to his mom, and she said he is not dying. You know, so just get off the phone with your stupid ex-wife and all her stupid lies. She's just spreading stupid gossip. She doesn't even know. So Jada's flipping out in the background, so Will's like, oh, I'll let you go. You know. Then, who should show up at the door but her friend Fawn? She opens the door, and Fawn's face tells the tale. Tupac's dead. Well, her knees buckle. She says, I nearly fell to the floor. My whole system crashed, and I lost my breath for a moment. I never once saw myself on this planet without him here. Somewhere on it. I felt a huge piece of love for me leave the world, and a part of myself gone. And in its place was rageful sadness. So she does, though, what she has always done. She boxes up the grief, and she just moves on. Even though after Tupac dies, there's so much going on around who killed him, who was involved with it. Did Suge Knight have something to do with it? Did Suge Knight lure him to his death and all of this? And she ends the chapter by talking about the fact that she knew something wasn't right. I mean, obviously he was murdered in cold blood, but she says that she was glad that she never made it to Vegas, because she says, my last memories of Tupac is not an image of him in a coma, and I'm glad I didn't have to share space with Suge as Pac was dying. When I heard that Pac had been cremated, I was very upset, and I immediately believed that Suge was behind that decision, which made me ask questions. I never heard Pac say that he wanted to be turned into ashes. Never. And in fact, she says that Tupac often talked about the fact that he imagined his funeral and that there would be masses of people in the streets following his coffin and all of this. He had some pretty morose fantasies. But anyway, she knew how he thought. And it had nothing to do with burning up his body into a box of ashes. But it gets worse. This Suge Knight guy. At the private memorial that Afeni put on at Jasmine's house, the doorbell rings. She answers the door. Who should be standing there but Suge Knight? She says that he delivered Pac's ashes into my very hands in the cardboard box one is given by the crematorium. I'll never forget the slight smile in his eyes when he handed that box to me, like, here's your homie. She doesn't think that she's overreacting to the situation. She doesn't feel like, looking back on it, she's putting color in the moment when there was nothing there, but she says that she felt like in that moment, she wanted him to pay, like she's never wanted anyone to pay before. Like she was full body desiring of revenge. Everything in her was screaming to attack this guy. And she said that even when she'd been held at gunpoint, she didn't feel that same revenge toward the person who had put her life in jeopardy that she felt when she looked at Suge Knight. She says Pac was dead and Suge handed me his ashes in a little cardboard box like it's just another effing day. No, I'm sorry for your loss, nothing. I felt helpless and I hated myself for my helplessness. I hated that I had no way to get even, take revenge, confront Suge, find the joker who pulled the trigger, and make somebody effing pay. Then she goes on to say the thing that makes my heart just like, hallelujah, because this is what I've been thinking the entire time. She says, I hated the streets. I hated hip-hop and every fake-ass gangster acting like they really got some gangster shit when within only 6 months we had 2 hip-hop giants dead, Pac and Biggie, and don't nobody know nothing and ain't nobody trying to do nothing. Yeah, exactly. What is all this fake-ass gangster shit? What is that? What are y'all up to? What is all of that world? Y'all just, what is that? What is this like made-up beef all the time? Well, that's how she came to feel about it. She says, F this bullshit and everybody in it. For years to come, I would feel like I had let Pac down at the end. I had been able to show up for him for so many years, and at this most crucial time, I didn't know how to show up in a way that didn't rock the boat. It was complicated by the fact that there were people then who believed Suge had done right by Pac and his family. But I knew different. Pac's life had been stolen, and as things unfolded, I would find that his trust had been betrayed as he was making moves to change the direction of his life. But she didn't fight to expose the truth. She just didn't have it in her. Like, to continue to contend with the memory of a lost person is something that she just emotionally, mentally cannot do. So when somebody dies, it's really sad, but she moves on. And she cannot do anything other than just, full steam ahead, box it up, didn't happen, la, la, la. She says that she wasn't able to help, but Afeni eventually put on her cape and went to war to expose how Pac had been financially exploited during his death row tenure. And that wasn't the half of it. As time passed, it healed nothing. I didn't even know how to grieve Pac. So I stuffed my rage, my pain, my shame into a forgotten place within me. And I never felt again the same love for hip-hop or the streets. From then on, it was all dead to me. Whew, good chapter. Now let's get on into the next one. The Reluctant Bride. All right, I'm going to give us some broad brushstrokes on this one. She says that she and Will's family got along really well. And it was awesome because both families just sort of melded into each other. Now, it's not like she's got a whole slew of folks for him to meet. It's like her mom. But he had people for her to meet. And one of those people was his grandma named Gigi, or called Gigi. Gigi thought that Will should have let the whole family know when he was dating someone he knew after his divorce. And so she was constantly at him. I want to meet your new girl. I want to meet your new girl. So he flies her out to California. But Will did something that I'm like, what? That's really too bad for grandma and for everybody involved. Will told grandma, you got to watch Jason's Lyric. You got to see that movie before you meet Jada. It's going to tell you everything you need to know. Jada has a pretty explicit scene. Now, it's not actually her. It's a body double. But still, you don't want to see this girl like that. And then she walks into the house. After, she literally just finished watching it and then Jada shows up. And Gigi's I don't know why young people feel like they got to take their clothes off to make movies these days. Back in my day, it was different. Et cetera, et cetera. So Jada felt immediately off her footing in that situation because it's don't want to walk in and see grandma and grandma's, seeing both cheeks. Embarrassing. So she tells Will, he pulls Will aside and she's like, why did you do that? That's super embarrassing. You know, like, now I got to talk to your grandmother and, you know, that was her first introduction to me as a human being. And Will's like, it's funny. We're all going to laugh about it. And she didn't think it was funny, and she still doesn't think it's funny, and she says they still debate it to this day. But she and Gigi did become friends. It didn't, like, mark their relationship for all of time. She says she liked Gigi because she got Marion vibes off of Gigi. And you remember Marion was the grandmother that sort of helped raise her. And she says that one of the things she loved about Gigi was Gigi just said what was on her mind. She said one time she was leaving to go to the set of Set It Off, where she's playing this female bank robber. And as she was leaving for work one day, Gigi frowned and blurted out, you look a mess. You always dress like an orphan. She's like, you're a nice looking girl. Put some better clothes on. And she's like, oh, well, why would I do that? I'm just going to go to set and they're going to dress me up the way they want me. I don't need to dress up to go take my clothes off to get redressed. You know, so Gigi grudgingly agreed. But, you know, one of the things she did love about Gigi was not blinded by Will's star. You know, she just wanted Will to stay humble, stay yoked to God, and abide by Christ's teachings. And, you know, if he was doing that, then that's what made her happy. You know, all this movie making did nothing for Gigi. Okay. So she says that Will, as we've already mentioned before, had won over everybody in her family. Her mom did a 180 on Will. Remember, originally she was all like, well, actually, really, I think she did a 360, because the first time she saw Will, she's like, how come you can't date a nice guy like that? Second time she hears from Will, she's like, why is he calling you? He's married. Third time she has something to say, it's, why are you dating that guy? He's got a kid. It's going to be complicated. Now, suddenly, she's returned to her original feelings about Will. Well, he's such a nice guy. I'm just so glad you're with him. So, because her mother loves Will so much, you know, she wants them to seal this deal. I mean, they've been dating for 2 years. Enough of this already. So she's breathing down their neck about that. The chapter goes on to give a lot of little color about what sort of relationship they had and how Will was just this big jokester. She says that he was like full on ridiculous all the time and that he just was so silly. And most of the time it drove her crazy, as she's mentioned before. His sense of humor was not what's up. But sometimes he would do things that were really funny. And she goes on to tell the story, and I'm like, this is a weird story, but one time she's getting out of the shower, right? And I guess, you know, Tupac said she'd gotten all Hollywood, and maybe she had, because she gets out of the shower. Will notice she's missed a few bikini waxing appointments. Quite frankly, she'd quit going. Remember, when she first showed him in Hollywood, hair was what was, you know, you had hair, and in her culture, in her community, she says that was like really sexy, but, you know, Hollywood says it isn't. So she'd really grabbed that idea on, and so she's like getting the full waxes. But it hurt, and so she'd quit getting the bikini waxes. But then Will saw her getting out of the shower, and he had something to say about it. And he's like, you missed a few appointments there? And, you know, she's like, well, you're a guy. You don't know how it feels. It's terribly painful. You know, leave me alone. So he goes into her closet, and he finds this little beanie that she had that was, like, knit with this kind of really fuzzy black sort of Angora wool. And so he stuffs it into his own underwear, then hikes his underwear up so that the beanie's like kind of showing on either side. And then he like walks past her and he's like, do you feel good about the way this looks? Do you like to look like this? And she's like, he's just so funny. We just had such good laughs. I'm like, yeah, you know, the things people do behind closed doors. Okay, moving on. Like I said, broad strokes here, broad strokes. One of the stories that she tells, though, to sort of give you an idea of the crack that was in their relationship, is that she felt like both she and Will had grown up in homes where pain was not addressed in any way that was positive. And then unless it was like a, you know, 5-alarm fire, you just didn't do anything about it. And this was really detrimental, she says, to their wholeness. She gives a story where she and all her, like, her huge pack of dogs, you know, she's got that pack of dogs, and then Will had a couple of Rottweilers too, so there's just like a bajillion dogs. Or Cesar Millan is the one helping her to train this pack of beasts. So they would go on these big hikes up in the mountains, and take all the dogs. And, you know, it was like real hiking. It wasn't like a walk in the dog park. She's got her hiking boots on. They're going up the mountain. Cesar remembers that there's this place, this like natural water source. He wants to go like water the dogs. So he tears down the side of this mountain. It's really steep. Everyone's running, all the dogs and everything. And as she's trying to follow him in the pack of animals, she rolls her ankle. And everyone like has already abandoned her. And so she's, you know, crawling back up the hill, trying to get to the main road and waits for them to come back. When they come back, Cesar helps her down the mountain. She drives home. She gets into the house, and her tight hiking boot had sort of worked as a splint around her ankle, but as soon as she took that boot off, her foot just blew up. And she says to Will, who's sitting on the couch watching TV, "I really hurt myself. Do you think that I should go to the doctor?" And he glances over and he's like, "You're good." And he keeps watching his show. Well, the next day, it's so painful she cannot walk on it in any way. She's really, really hurting. And she says to him, "Please take me to the doctor. I think something's really wrong. This doesn't just feel like a sprain." And he can't. There's scheduling conflicts. So she has to call his friend Dwayne. Dwayne takes her to the doctor. Lo and behold, the ankle is broken. Well, she feels like this is an indication that Will should have listened to her when she said she was hurt, but also she should have listened to herself knowing something was wrong. She writes, "The broken ankle moment was pivotal. More than I realized at the time, neither Will nor I was able to recognize the seriousness of the injury. My stance and his was if I'm not crying in dire pain, I must be fine. This attitude came from our upbringings. We were both hardened because of how we grew up, dealing with things far more extreme than a broken ankle. Neither one of us had been taught to slow down, take a good look when hurt comes up. When they did come up, the mantra was, ignore it, just keep moving." I think a lot of people do that. I mean, I do. You know, because it's like, what am I going to do if I stop and examine the pain? Will that help me? You know, will it help, or will it just make me crumble? I got to stand upright. There's a lot of people relying on me. I don't have time to sit and wallow in the sad. You know, what good will that accomplish? And that's the easy thing to think. And you know, I think one of the detriments of that is that you can end up continually finding yourself hurt in the same ways if you won't stop and figure out how you got hurt in the first place. Anyway, moving on. She said that the other thing is Will had always mentioned to her how much he liked her strength. And so she felt like if she was now to suddenly act like, "I need you to take care of me," and show a side of weakness and all this, that he would find that less attractive. So she just kept acting like tough guy all the time. Then we get a long story about the first time she had to babysit Trey by herself. And I won't go into it. It's like really long. But suffice it to say that she was excited to be able to babysit, but she didn't really know what to do with a kid. And she's like, okay, what would a kid like to do? What would a kid like to do? What would a kid like to do? Oh, candy. So she takes him to the biggest, best candy store that he could ever hope to imagine. It's like every single kind of candy and then some. Lets him buy as much as he wants. They get in the car, and she lets him eat all of it on the way home. All of it. And she'd let him buy whatever he wanted in the store. This kid's like little bitty. Like toddler, I think. 3? Anyway, they get in the car. By the time they get home, this kid is bouncing off of the walls. He's like running laps around the house. He's like running up the stairs, running down the stairs, bouncing off the walls, bouncing on the furniture. Just all out extreme crazy. So she calls her mom. She's like, "Mom, what do I do?" Mom's like, "Put the boy in the bathtub. Maybe the warm water will calm him down." Doesn't. He just acts a fool in the bathtub. Then she calls Cherie, or Cherie calls and is like, "How's it going?" And she tells Cherie what happened. And Cherie's like, "Oh, you can't give him that much sugar." You know, finally the kid crashes and, you know, all is well. But what it showed was she didn't really know much about babies or little kids or what to do with them. And this was unfortunate because the next line says, "I'm pregnant." Okay, she tells this wild tale where she and Will have gone away to Cabo San Lucas, and they're having some wild, passionate get together. And when it's all said and done, she rolls over and she's like, "I'm pregnant." And she claims that she knew she was pregnant because if you've ever been into a bank vault, you know there's a lock that looks like a big round steering wheel, and when you turn it, it locks with a click. Well, that's what it felt like in my womb. I don't know about that. I do not know about that. Like, I've heard a lot of stories about people who are like, "I just knew I was pregnant," you know, and I'm just sort of like, don't you always wonder if you're not on any kind of birth control? Because she wasn't. She'd like gotten off this one birth control because it like gave her depression. And so she hadn't, I guess, found another birth control to be on. So she's not on birth control. Would you not every time be like, might be pregnant this time? Because you've made no efforts to not be. But as soon as they've done it, she's convinced, she's with child. And Will laughs in her face. What? You're crazy. He even gets up and calls his friend Dwayne, and they laugh about Jada together. But she's crying all night, crying all day. She cries and cries and cries. Finally, when they get home, she buys 10 pregnancy tests and calls a friend over who she knows isn't pregnant. And they take test for test. She takes one, the friend takes one. She takes one, the friend takes one. Negative, negative, negative for the friend. Positive, positive, positive for her. So she gathers up her 5 pregnancy tests, runs over to where Will's filming Men in Black, lays them out in his trailer, and is like, what you going to do about it? And he's like, well, we'll figure it out. So she calls her mother, and her mother's like, well, you got to marry that guy. I mean, that's all there is to it. You guys need to get married. Well, she's been wanting Jada to get married anyway, so this is just a good reason to. Adding to the confusion of the whole thing, her morning sickness was beyond anything she could have comprehended. And it's all day sickness for her. And she just got into this new movie. She's with Anne Hesh and Vince Vaughn in Return to Paradise. Vince doesn't know what's wrong with her. He has a couple of choice words. I mean, when she can't even stand up for longer than 10 minutes, he's like, oh, wow, you're a real peach. She did tell Anne what was wrong. She felt she could confide in another woman, but, nobody knew what was going on. She just feels terrible. She just feels like she's in this big predicament. Will does not seem as blown away by all of it as she does. And so he proposes to her, and he's like, I don't need a reason to want to get married to you. You and I have always had a great connection, and this little life that we have made together is one that I want to foster and take care of, but that's not why I'm asking you to marry me. And so he does this beautiful proposal. Interestingly, she goes down and buys her own engagement ring. She goes down to Harry Winston and buys her own pear-shaped ring set in platinum. I don't know why she wouldn't let Will buy her a ring. She does say that in the future, Will was going to just knock it out of the park and buy me this 10-carat ring from a store I don't even know. I'm not fancy enough to even remember the name. I'm not even fancy enough to know the name of this place. Anyway, he buys her this 10-carat ring. And that's all well and good, but she wants you to know she bought her engagement ring because she wanted to feel like she had some power in the situation in which she felt powerless. Here she is pregnant and having to hurry up and make decisions. She's dragging her feet on the marriage, but it isn't that she didn't like Will. She had just never thought of herself as married. And she doesn't want to get married simply because she's pregnant. She's like, I have money, I have means, I could be a single mom now. And I don't know why everybody is pushing me into this traditional choice when I'm not living in an environment in which that choice has to be made. I can make my own money and take care of my kid. So she's dragging her feet a little bit on that, but I don't think it was that she didn't like Will. It's just she didn't like the pressure of feeling like choices were out of her hands. Anyway, they're engaged, but now it's the question of what are we going to do about the actual wedding? And she doesn't want a big wedding. She wants to go to the mountaintop, her, Will, and somebody to preside over it and just get married in that way. But her mom freaks out. And her mom's like, you're my only daughter, and I really want a big wedding, and how could you do this to me? And so she gives in. And Will also is like, yeah, let's have a wedding. So they end up going to Baltimore. They have their, woodsy ceremony with, about 80 friends. And she wears this white velvet dress, and he wears a white tux, and all this. It's very pretty. And they had to keep it all on the down low because they didn't want anybody to know about it. And, they didn't even tell the guests until the day before the wedding where to arrive. Grandma Shirley's, in a huff about it because she feels like Jada made up that role to keep Grandma Shirley from coming. That lady is just crazy. But they have the wedding. Now, one other piece to this whole puzzle is Will's people told Will that he needed to get a prenup. And he went to her and said, hey, my people think I should have a prenup. I've had one divorce already, and they just want to make sure that I take care of business this time. And Jada was like, you know what? You can get a prenup if you want one, but I am not going to sit here and think with you about our eventual demise when we haven't even gotten married yet. So he was like, you know what? You're right. I don't want to think about it. I don't want a prenup. Let's make sure we don't have one. And she says that it was the choice to not have a prenup that kept them together for so long, because if you have a prenup, then you're always ready for, well, when we get divorced, I've already got everything sorted. So it makes divorce less scary because you already know the hard part You already know how everything's going to be divided. And so she said not having a prenup really helped them when times were sketchy. And that's pretty much all you need to know about that chapter. Reluctant Bride, that sounds like a pretty dramatic title for a chapter where she's not reluctant about Will. And I don't understand why later on she rewrites the story, for television audiences to talk about, I didn't even really want to marry him. So my mom told me I had to get married to him. But I didn't even really, that wasn't even like on my radar of things to do. And in this chapter, yeah, that is true. She'd never thought of herself as the marrying type. She'd not seen enough examples of healthy, happy marriages to think that that was something she would want to enter into. But it wasn't, the way she talked about it on TV was like, I was never that in love with Will. I was forced to get married by my very conservative mother who thought that this is what had to be done, but that wouldn't have been my choice. But then when she writes about it in the book, it's not that at all. It was just trying to grapple with who she was. And, she's no longer this independent woman. She now has a baby until she's got responsibilities coming down the pipeline that she's like really sort of surprised about. And then being married is another layer of responsibility and accountability that she wasn't sure if she wanted. She doesn't like accountability. This is why she does not grapple well with grief, because she feels accountable to honor the death of somebody, and she doesn't know how to do that. She does not know how to be accountable to other people. So to be married is like a layer of accountability and relationship that she doesn't want to take on. But it didn't have to do with Will. She would have felt that way with any guy. And so I think that point should be clearly made. So if she wants to go back and act like, Will was so silly and Will didn't understand about my broken ankle, all right. But nothing other than these like sort of paltry little examples can she show us that it wasn't like a real love match. Because everything else, she says that they would talk for literally hours about things. They loved to debate, but not like angrily, just they loved to talk. They loved to learn new things. They seem like a perfect match on every single conceivable level. And every time she tries to show us a crack, I'm like, I don't know if it's a crack. I mean, it's like y'all are two human beings trying to be in a relationship. Humanity is messy. Being in a relationship with people is messy. It's never, a Hallmark movie. So most of life is the Hallmark movie where there's the misunderstanding, very little of life is the part where everything's just going, swimmingly. Anyway, that's the end of those two chapters. But like I said, this is going to be our going rate from now on. We are going to be going 2 chapters, 3 chapters if I can manage it. We're going hard to the end of this book because Christmas is coming and Britney Spears comes to us at Christmas time. So I'm excited for that. All right, bye-bye. I see you later.